Intimate Portrait, hosted by Meredith Vieira.
I'm Meredith Vieira, and this is an intimate portrait of Natalie Merchant. At one time, rock and roll was a guy's world, but certain women changed that. One was Natalie Merchant. With her distinctive voice and haunting lyrics, Natalie stood out as lead singer of the band 10,000 Maniacs, then as a solo artist whose albums have gone platinum. Natalie Merchant showed us there was a place for idealism in the rebellious world of rock and roll. Here's actress Janeane Garofalo to tell us more.
Nothing could set me up for what I saw. She was such a bolt of energy.
I was always really nervous on stage, being in front of people. And I've just spin around a lot. On one tour, I spun a little hole in the bottom of my shoe.
But behind the uninhibited performance was a sensitive and extremely talented singer-songwriter with an unforgettable voice.
As a singer, I don't think you can compare Natalie to anybody. And I think that's what's so good about her.
Then, after 13 years as a maniac, she opted for sanity and struck out on her own. Today, she occupies a special niche, somewhere between alternative cult heroine and mainstream artist.
One of the things I'm trying to do as an artist is comfort people. Tell them you're not alone.
I'm Janeane Garofalo. This is an intimate portrait of my friend, Natalie Merchant.
My parents married right out of high school in '59. It's actually really funny to see photographs of them because with my sister Bernadette, their first child, they look a little trepidatious. It's like, what exactly are we supposed to be doing with this infant? And but by the time my mom was 21, she had 3 kids, all in diapers. And she said it was pretty challenging. I'm glad I grew up with parents who could get down on the front lawn and, you know, play games with us. My dad would build huge snow forts and go sledding with us, and we did lots of camping and canoeing.
The Merchant family lived in Jamestown, a small industry town in West New York, about 2 hours south of Buffalo. Anthony, Natalie's dad, made bricks in a glass factory. Anne, Natalie's mother, had her hands full with 3 children, but she managed to hold part-time jobs as a waitress and a bank teller. To help ease the financial burden, the young family moved in with Natalie's paternal grandparents.
By nature, I was a very timid child. I was always finding the little baby bird that fell out of the nest and trying to feed her with a eyedropper for days, and then being traumatized when the bird died. And I would be the one in the garage all night with the kittens, and I was that kind of kid. I was teacher's pet and proud to be teacher's pet. I had an obsession with Leonardo da Vinci because I was left-handed and he was left-handed, and he wrote upside down and backwards, and so did I. So I wanted to be Leonardo da Vinci when I grew up. I wanted to be a Renaissance woman.
I've been treated so wrong, I've been treated so long, as if I'm becoming untouchable.
I always thought everybody loved music. How could you not like music? And I love to sing. My sister and I sang all the time. And I like the music in the church too. I love the sound of the organ, and I love the whole room of people singing together.
I slow dying flower.
When Natalie was 8, her mom bought an old piano for the living room. Natalie found herself immediately drawn to the instrument. Her mother decided Natalie should have a piano teacher.
She came to me for lessons when she was in 4th grade. Natalie was a good student. She was very conscientious. She wanted to learn chords.
It's probably the most horrifying experience of my little life. I would have just a miniature ulcer every time I would have to go to lessons. Because I couldn't read music. I pretended to Patricia that I was reading music, but I think she was smart enough to figure out that I couldn't read music.
Natalie's parents divorced when she was 10. Her mom remarried soon afterward. Anne and the kids moved with their husband to Westfield, New York, a community on Lake Erie, about a half hour from Jamestown.
It was very scary. You've lived in one community your whole life, and then you're transplanted at the most awkward moment of your existence. Like the preteen years. And I had really short hair, no breasts, and people thought I was a boy, and that was traumatic for me because I'd always been Natalie, the girl. I knew I was a girl. I felt pretty secure in my girlness.
In Westfield, Natalie decided she liked to sing and went after school to the music teacher for private lessons.
She had a beautiful, rich voice, even as a young girl. Very natural voice, non-pushed. She just opened her mouth and this beautiful sound came out.
Strangle the heart. They say their promises are sweet and they blow, but I don't need them. I've been treated so wrong, I've been treated so long, as if I'm becoming untouchable. I'm a slow dying flower, frost killing out, sweet turning sour and untouchable. I need the darkness.
Westfield is home to a traveling troupe of European-style puppeteers. And Natalie's mom often took her shy daughter to local performances.
It was sort of almost a magnet that we drew children up here. We would get them working. We were always building, we were always creating our puppets.
I sort of wandered in there one day because my mother worked across the street. It was stepping into a magical place. I never got involved in actually being part of the troupe and manipulating the puppets, but just having a place to go and spend time where people were very accepting of me and encouraged my creative impulses was great. The culture of teenage kids is very restrictive, and they want everyone to conform. And it was really great to be with these non-conforming theater-type people. It opened another world.
I'm untouchable. Do you remember the way that you touched me before? All the trembling sweetness, I loved and you know. Painstaking promises always spread like prayers. I don't need.
Natalie graduated high school early and enrolled at Jamestown Community College. She was only 16 years old. At college, Natalie was drawn to the campus radio station where she struck up friendships with some of the student DJs. Natalie didn't know it then, but she was meeting the guys with whom she'd be spending the next 13 years of her life.
Oh, I need this. Is it dark enough? Can you see me? Do you want me? Can you reach me? Shut your mouth, better hold your breath. Kiss me now and catch your death.
Next, this shy girl from Jamestown is about to become a maniac. When
Natalie Merchant, An Intimate Portrait returns.
Life.
I'm Janeane Garofalo. We now return to Natalie Merchant, An Intimate Portrait. Natalie's music career began in Jamestown during her college years. In the evening, she would go to parties at a warehouse in town. Here, local musicians would take turns providing the entertainment. And one night, Natalie came in carrying some school books.
One was a 1950s social studies textbook. And they asked me if I would sing, because I like to go to parties and dance, but nobody knew if I could sing. And I said, well, I'll give it a try. And I had nothing to sing, so I just started improvising out of this social studies book. And that's when I was dubbed the idiot savant and became the singer of 10,000 Maniacs.
We chose the name 10,000 Maniacs because it was sort of a shocking type name, and it sort of identified us with the punk movement or with the new wave movement. We did our first gig as the Burn Victims, which is sort of exploitive, and Natalie hated it and said that she wouldn't play anymore unless we changed the name.
The Burn Victims? It was better than the Burn Victims. I wanted to be called Tundra Bunnies. That was my vote.
So we said, well, how about 10,000 Maniacs? And that didn't sound so bad.
The name stuck. But to some audiences, 10,000 Maniacs sounded like a hard rock band.
I remember we played in Berlin once, first time, and das hardcore band, 10,000 Maniacs, you know. I thought you were going to be a hardcore band. And these guys, like skinheads, were throwing beer cans at me, and I was like, I'm a folk singer.
That's whistling in your ears.
We never knew for sure if Natalie was going to come to the shows or not. Sometimes her mother didn't want her to come because she was a lot younger than the rest of us. You could tell that she was a budding talent because after the shows, that's all people wanted to talk about is where did you find that girl, and you know, where is she from, what country is she from? We can't understand her lyrics or whatever, but she was very compelling.
In the early days, there was often a good reason audiences couldn't understand the lyrics to Natalie's songs. There weren't any.
Well, the PAs were so terrible that no one could understand what I was saying anyways. For the most part, I would just sing gibberish. Whole night of gibberish, and people were like, your lyrics are so fascinating. I'm thinking nothing. But to me, it was very free.
Both of us tend to sing more for the sound of the voice and not so much for the meaning of the words. I think we both kind of matured into writing words that actually had content and meaning.
Not many singers would do it, but she would actually go up there and sing songs just phrasing, putting in sounds and things that she liked the sound of. So in reality, she really wasn't singing words or lyrics.
People who heard those records or would go see them perform live didn't know which country or which part of the world she came from. She's got a look, you know, the way that she looks, she could be from the Balkans, she could be from Peru.
In fact, Natalie is an all-American New Yorker. Italian on her dad's side, and mixed between French, Irish, and German on her mom's. But adding to the aura of mystery around Natalie was her unique style of dancing.
I took a couple semesters of Martha Graham technique, so I fancied myself, you know, a modern dancer.
Whenever you read a review of her, they always would describe her as a whirling dervish because she was quite able to spin without getting sick to her stomach. I mean, she could spin with the best of them, you know?
It was meditative for me. I was always really nervous on stage, being in front of people. And I would just spin around a lot. That's just what I did. I did spin. So much on one tour, I spun a little hole in the bottom of my shoe.
She had very long hair in those days, and so she'd look like someone from, you know, from the rest home, and people would say that. They'd say, is she crazy? Is she nuts? You know, and it added to the mystique that someone could be so sensitive one minute, and then she'd scream too, right into the mic sometimes. We'd be doing some angry music, and blood-curdling screams. She was an 18-year-old person, you know, having 350 people in a room hanging on your every word for the first time. It's quite a feeling of power.
When Natalie got around to writing actual lyrics for her songs, they proved to be worth waiting for. although the subjects she chose to write about were a far cry from the material one normally associates with popular music. Natalie soon found herself writing or co-writing all the band's material. For inspiration, she borrowed heavily from her childhood in Jamestown and her impressions as a sensitive child growing up in the turbulent 60s and 70s.
Her lyrics, particularly earlier on in the career of the Maniacs, were very dark in many cases. You would be dancing to a song that you realized halfway through was about child abuse, in the case of a song like What's the Matter Here, and that you would be caught up and then struck down by the realization that, wait a minute, I'm not, I don't want to dance to this. This is serious stuff here.
Some of my most angry music and the most powerful protest music that I've ever written. If you didn't pay really close attention to it, you would think it was just a pleasant pop song. There was something very subversive about singing about Agent Orange in a way that people would think I was singing about what a pleasant day it was.
She had no way of knowing it then, but Natalie's subversive lyrics would soon find their way into the mainstream of popular music. Next, when Natalie Merchant, An Intimate Portrait continues.
And your budget. The next move is up to you.
I'm Janeane Garofalo. We now return to Natalie Merchant, An Intimate Portrait. In 1981 and 82, Natalie and the Maniacs crisscrossed the Northeast, lived in their van and played to small houses. They released a pair of independent albums during this time, but despite their strong local following, the band got almost no airplay outside of college stations.
We would go to Toronto, or we would go to Buffalo, or we'd go to Pittsburgh, or we'd go to Cleveland, and to me, whoa, Cleveland was exciting. Now it takes Paris or Rome to get me that excited, but at the time, I was like, Richmond, Virginia is where it's happening.
Our first gigs, you'd have to pretty much schmooze with the crowd, not necessarily just to make friends and business contacts, but to maybe find a place to crash that night. I mean, we'd go to Richmond, Virginia or something like that, and 3 of us would stay at one person's house, 2 of us would stay at another person's house, in sleeping bags, on the floor. Half the time we'd stay with other bands. Those are the great days. You're away from home for the first time, you're in a rock and roll band. It's all you ever dreamed of at the time.
For 3 years, 10,000 Maniacs paid their dues while they lived the dream. One of the bands they met was just then emerging as the signature band of the alternative movement. They called themselves REM, and they were in the process of becoming hugely successful. Lead singer Michael Stipe still remembers the night he saw Natalie perform for the first time.
My friends were talking about this band called 10,000 Maniacs. This woman was a whirling dervish, and they were playing in Athens a lot. I went down one night to see them perform in a small club, and all the things I had heard about the band and what I'd heard about her, nothing could set me up for what I saw. She was a whirling dervish, and just such a bolt of energy.
Natalie seemed to have that effect on everybody.
Right from the start, young girls, young men would come up to her, and they would give her flowers, or they would give her a book of their favorite poetry, or here's something by Keats, or whatever. The rest of us never got hardly anything, but with Natalie it was like Gandhi or something.
That was pretty exciting that I was singing through a microphone and it was coming through the big speakers and people were, looking at me. That was pretty exciting.
The band's popularity increased, and by 1985, they were appearing along with REM in hip Manhattan nightclubs. It was here that executives from the Elektra label spotted them and signed the Maniacs to a recording contract. It looked as though the years of struggling were just about to pay off. Elektra sent them to London to record their first major label record, The Wishing Chair. The record got great reviews but didn't sell. Elektra believed in them enough to try it again. And for their next effort, the Maniacs were paired with producer Peter Asher, another Brit. Asher had enjoyed great success in the past with artists like James Taylor and Linda Ronstadt. Now, he was charged with taking the raw talent that was Natalie Merchant and the 10,000 Maniacs and making them successful.
I thought their songs were terrific, but occasionally were somewhat disorganized. Not in a bad way, but sometimes there's a really good bit of the song that I would like to have got to a little sooner. The strengths were the fact they didn't sound like anybody else, which to me is always the strongest attribute you can have in rock and roll, in fact in music in general. And Natalie's voice, which is just one of the extraordinary voices in pop music.
Recording of the new record in Los Angeles that Natalie had an encounter with the LA Police Department. She was walking down Sunset Boulevard barefoot, lost in thought, when she was stopped by a patrol car.
Not arrested, only detained. The only luggage I was carrying was a paper bag, and I took my shoes off, and I was wearing a 1930s cotton day dress. I looked like a Dorothea Lange photograph from the Depression, probably.
She was barefoot and had no identification. And the police stopped her and asked her what she was doing. They claimed that they thought she might be somebody they were looking for someone who'd come out of some mental institution or something.
And they asked me if English was my first language. They read my journal. They asked if I'd spent any time in an insane asylum.
They asked her what she was doing in LA. And she said, oh, I'm making a record. They went, oh, yeah, what's the name of the band? So she told them, 10,000 Maniacs. And of course, they found that far more incredible. She persuaded them to call me, and I confirmed that her whole story was true.
The record In My Tribe was released shortly afterward, and it was a multi-platinum triumph.
It was a great record. What Peter Asher provided as a producer, a very different sound, a much more kind of, I think, accessible sound. In a way, it had probably more to do with the times. It was like the music scene had kind of caught up to 10,000 Maniacs at that point. The timing was right. They'd been doing what they were doing all along. Finally, the music kind of caught up to them.
The success of In My Tribe marked Natalie's entry into the mainstream pop music consciousness. Overnight, she and the Maniacs were being mentioned in the same collective breath as mega bands like R.E.M., Pearl Jam, and U2. It was a heady experience and a wild ride. But after 2 years in the fast lane, Natalie began to burn out. The daily grind of life on the road had robbed her of her passion to make music, and she had always been an artist and now found little creativity in one-night stands singing the same songs over and over and over.
Don't understand. Your face said promises, whispered like prayers. I don't need them.
In 1989, depressed and exhausted, Natalie contracted spinal meningitis. She was too incapacitated to sing or write. Her music career was over, she thought. And worst of all, she didn't care. Next, Natalie finds new inspiration in an unlikely place. When Natalie Merchant, An Intimate Portrait returns. In Garofalo, we now return to Natalie Merchant, An Intimate Portrait. After nearly a decade on the road, Natalie came home to Jamestown. Her talent had taken her close to the top of the music business. She had 2 platinum records, but now, at the age of 26, she found herself at an all-time low.
We did tour relentlessly throughout in my tribe, Manzu. It was ridiculous. And so by the end of '89, I actually came home. And in addition to being totally exhausted and wiped out, I contracted spinal meningitis and ended up in the hospital. I was bedridden for months, and then I was just going from doctor to doctor for a year to try to get myself back to my robust health.
Natalie tried to use the time to write, but it just wouldn't come together. She moved to New York City, but wound up feeling alone and alienated.
It's hard when you're a musician. You fit into your little community that you travel with or you record with, but when the recording and the touring's over, you realize that everybody else's lives have gone on and you don't really fit in.
Comes from everywhere. It's a little more than you can bear. And I know that it will hurt. I know that it will break your heart. The way things are and the way they've been. And the way they've always people shall ourselves up, so see the bush and shove for berry wars. When I mean mine is on their minds. You can read about it in their eyes. People ruthless, people cruel, all the damage that some people do. Full of hatred, full of pride. It's enough to make you lose your mind. And I know that it will hurt. I know that it will break your heart. The way things are and the way they've been.
It was at this time, during her recovery, that Natalie took an unpaid job at a homeless shelter, working with children.
It will break your heart.
At a loss for a way to communicate with traumatized children who very often spoke no English, Natalie found the answer came naturally.
Don't spend this
When I would sing to them or sing with them, it would open things up. And I realized after so many years of playing music for hundreds of thousands of people and selling records to millions of people, I'd forgotten what music was and how powerful it could be.
Natalie healed in time and was able to start writing again. When she did, she was surprised to find that the children had affected her more than she knew.
I decided that rather than writing so many overtly political songs and rattling so many cages, maybe what I would do is spend some time trying to sing about the beauty in life and the respect of that beauty and preservation of that beauty. And so that's what I did.
know that it will hurt.
Natalie gave the Maniacs 2 years' notice. She'd stay with them for one more record and one final tour. The record, Our Time in Eden, went platinum. Then in 1993, the recording of the band's Command performance on MTV's Unplugged went triple platinum. Shortly afterward, at the height of her popularity, Natalie Merchant left 10,000 Maniacs for good.
I just told them I've reached a point where I feel like I really want to have my own voice, my discreet voice. I want to write my own songs, and I want to travel when I want to travel, work with people I want to work with when I want to work. And I don't have that freedom here. I was in 10,000 Maniacs from the time I was 17 until I was 30. And in that space of time, I can say to any woman, any man, from the time you're 17 to you're 30, unless you're made of stone, you'll change. And that's what I did. I just grew up and changed. I just felt like I needed to move along, and they understood.
And I know that it will break your heart, the way things are and the way they've been. Don't spread the discontent, don't spread the lies. Don't make the same mistakes with your own life. And don't disrespect yourself, don't lose your pride. Don't think everybody is gonna choose your side.
I remember I wrote the song, I May Know the Word, the day I got home from the last 10,000 Maniacs show. So I pretty much started writing. I was so eager. I started the day it ended, and I was in the studio within 6 months making my first solo record.
Natalie knew that leaving the band had been the right decision. Still, she worried that her first solo effort might not be as popular as her records with the band. Her first solo album, Tiger Lily, turned out to be the biggest hit Natalie ever had. It sold more than 4 million records, 1 million more than her biggest hit with 10,000 Maniacs.
I like having my sovereignty as a solo artist. And I feel like I've put enough distance between myself and my era with 10,000 Maniacs that I've learned quite a bit, and I've achieved quite a bit, and I feel like I'm in a really solid place.
Next, Natalie takes her act to Broadway. When Natalie Merchant, An Intimate Portrait returns. I'm Janeane Garofalo. We now return to Natalie Merchant, An Intimate Portrait.
There are very few people in pop music who can write songs that have political content and get away with it. Natalie's one of them. She's chosen to do that sometimes, and she's, I think, kind of moved more towards a personal politic in the work that she's doing now, which I find ultimately more satisfying.
People are always asking me that as a musician, do you feel a responsibility to speak out about issues, to be a witness of your times, to perform in benefit concerts? And I always say, yes, of course I do. But I think that responsibility is an underrated characteristic in our country. I think everyone should be more responsible, and everyone should be monitoring themselves to see, am I discussing things in front of children, for instance, that their minds can't handle and that emotionally they can't handle right now? Am I sensitive to that? And whether I do that in front of my friends' children at the kitchen table, or I do that when I'm making a film, or when I'm writing a book, or when I'm recording a record.
The effect and impact that she's had on me as a songwriter, as a lyricist, as a singer, has been profound, and continues to this day. I actually brought a list of songs, REM songs that she had great influence on me. You can see there's over 50 songs here.
Once labeled alternative, today Natalie's music reaches a wide audience.
10-year-old kids from the suburbs to 65-year-old heart surgeons. It's, construction workers, cab drivers. I was walking down the street in someplace like Toledo, Ohio, and this woman cab driver went by. Natalie, you kick out of the cab window.
In 1999, Natalie recorded a new album, Ophelia. As a companion piece to the record, Natalie created a short film in which she played all the characters herself. Ophelia also inspired a series of live and concert performances. The last week of the Ophelia
important in my being able to develop as an artist, because she was so encouraging and very supportive. From the time I was a little girl, she sort of spotted me as the one out of all her kids that wanted to play the piano, wanted to dance, wanted to sing, wanted to paint. And I was always willing to tag along with her if she went to the symphony.
'Cause I've been treated so wrong, I've been treated so long, as if I'm
Whenever kids come up to me and say at concerts, I want to be a songwriter, what should I do? I say, learn to play an instrument, number one. I actually wish I'd practiced more, because I'd be a better piano player.
Natalie Merchant began her career in music as a shy girl in Jamestown, New York. Today, after nearly 20 years of making music and touring the world, Natalie has managed not only to be a success, but to maintain her artistic integrity in what can be a heartbreaking business. And even more importantly, she's grown into a woman with a good idea of who she is and how she intends to spend the rest of her life.
One of the things I'm trying to do as an artist is comfort people. Tell them you're not alone. I see what you see. You're not the only one who sees this. And sometimes saying, well, this is the only rational response you could have to this insanity, is despair, or anger, or complete frustration. Some of the art that I'm most attracted to is art that reflects that sense of drawing someone closer and saying, look at this, look at this alternative. Let's examine what's atrocious about life, and then let's also offer some kind of alternative, some kind of hope. There's too much reflection upon what's awful without any thought to how to remedy it. It just creates despair, and I don't want to live in a culture of despair. I'd like to live in a culture of hope. I feel like I'm only a third of the way through my life, and I'm only a third of the way through this search for trying to figure out exactly who I am and what I have to say to people as an artist.
Natalie Merchant has come a long way since the days when her songs had no lyrics. If the first part of her life is any indication, the rest of it will definitely be something to sing about.
The rest of Natalie Merchant's life is likely to be exactly what Natalie chooses it to be. The point is not whether we sing about it, but that she does. She's already proved that women can bring a whole different dimension to rock and roll, and that sweetness, light, and defiance can coexist in the same artist. For Intimate Portrait, I'm Meredith Vieira.